Hello and welcome to the Utah Puck Report. I'm your host, Jay Stevens. Lots of stuff going on. We want to kind of explain everything as we get going here. We're going to start calling strategies and tactics. I want to teach the average listener, the person that has just started following hockey, and I also want to have the opportunity to further educate people that have been watching hockey their whole lives and maybe they don't understand certain things that have been going on with our team now that NHL's here. Everybody's paying attention, but every time I post something, people argue that I'm not an expert. So I thought, do I know an expert? Do I know a guy who maybe has built an NHL Stanley Cup championship before or a championship team and is currently trying to do the same thing? So GM Bill Armstrong from the Utah Hockey Club on the show today. Bill, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks, Jay, for having me in. It's my pleasure. It's a great time to talk hockey.
Man, it's just been so overwhelmingly amazing to have all this hockey here now, and I get to talk about it all the time. People want my opinion now. I'm not just talking Grizzlies and stuff like that. People are really buying into the team.
Yeah,
people are obsessed. They want information all the time. And then when they don't get proper information, they just take whatever information is available online and run with it. Have you been seeing that? Do you follow much online?
I do a little bit online. I mean, because I always check to see, the fan response, and I see it growing. People are really intrigued by hockey. I think there's people that have gone to the games and just become addicted to hockey in Utah, and it's been great. And you can hear it, and you can see it online, but you can hear it in our fans when they go to the games, how loud they are and how they're into our team and they know every single player. And it's a great thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I was telling Adrian, I believed in the team. I believed in Utah. Yeah. I believed that the NHL could work here. And I may have been the biggest trumpeter of it coming in, but I am completely surprised and so pleased at how much it's just taken over the market.
It is an exciting brand. I think, the way our team plays, the youngness of our group and the talent, and it's great for them to, the fans can go to a game and kind of see us grow right in front of their eyes. And I think they love the fact of the talent that goes on the ice, even though they're young and we're not a perfect team. They can see the hustle and the ability to make plays is coming, and it's growing right in front of their eyes. So I think there's a lot of excitement around our team, and we've been able to stay in the fight with all the injuries. And there, I think one of the understandings is that we were scared in the sense that our best players were out. We've never really played with our whole team actually on the ice. So it's also hope for our group and. In the simple fact that how excited our players are to come back after the break and everybody's fully healthy.
Yeah, and that's something we've been looking forward to. I keep saying it over and over again. I keep saying we have not seen the team that you put together that you wanted opening night. We haven't seen them yet because Marino and Dursey, I don't think they've ever played together.
Yeah.
For us anyway. And then Gunny goes down, Cooley goes down. Yeah. And it's like, man, but that's the NHL, right? It's a physical game. It's a tough schedule.
Yeah.
And teams drop players. So
I think it's even gotten tougher. When we first started the rebuild, there was 8 teams kind of going through the rebuild, and everybody's come out of it now. And so there's no teams that are invested at being at the bottom anymore. They want to get to the top. And so I think it's created an NHL that is unbelievable parity and unbelievable compete every single night, and there's no easy nights in our league, and I think that's caused to some degree probably a little bit some more injuries. We're not the only team that's banged up,
right? Yeah, and that's I don't know. It seems like we're the only team that's constantly banged up, but then I look at teams that come in and they're missing guys too. You talk about the rebuild, and that's something that I keep trying to educate people on.
Yeah.
And I keep preaching because people are like, they said we were going to make playoffs there this year, and they said this, and I'm like, they've never. The Utah Hockey Club, especially you, and I think I have you quoted as saying, and forgive me if I get it wrong, but you say some nights we're going to look like the best team in the NHL, and some nights it's going to be painful to watch.
Yeah.
You said we may be chasing that wild card spot.
Yeah.
That's what you told me at the beginning, and I'll tell you what, you've nailed it.
Yeah,
you've promised what you delivered.
And we've been able to do it while we've been, some of our best players, the Marinos and the Durzees and the Sergachev and the Gunthers and the Coolies have been out. And we've been able to still chase it and stay in it. And that's due to everything. I mean, I believe in the spirit of the team. I think our fan base and how loud they've cheered for us and the overwhelming responses we've landed here has had an impact on our group to continue to fight. And it's a good thing. And now we're getting out of that. We're getting some hope back with our players that have been injured. So it's really an exciting time for us, and we're chasing it. We're right there.
When we talk about chasing it, and you are like, hey, this is a long process. We're not going to jump right out. And so when you see some of these big trades that are going on, and you see that maybe there's some, Rantanen's a big name that could be out there, and man, he's an exciting player. And there are other guys, like I wanted to start the rumor that you guys were looking at Jonathan Taves even, right? Like, because he's a free agent.
Yeah.
But you have a process. And tell me again, how long does a rebuild normally take? Why don't you go out, like I get it, but why don't you go out and spend money right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to that. You have to let your group organically get older and better at the same time. And you've got to see what you have. So you have the Jack McBains of the world and the Logan Coolies and the Dylan Gunthers. They're not at the point where they're 27 years old. They're not Matthew Tkachuk's age where they're at their peak of their strength and their ability, and they give you the best chance. They've got a small window to win in Florida, and they're in that window. We're kind of on the other side of that, where we're young, and we're trying to get there, and we're trying to put good players around our youth and add players of the same age and talent that are going to go in there and help us one day win a championship. I think the other thing is every morning as a GM, we do wake up and chase every trade. We go down that path. Can that help us? Is it going to help us now, or is it going to help us in the future? We wake up with that process in our hockey ops group, and myself at the lead helm is trying to get better every single day. Can we add that player? Can that what is? But there's also some discipline behind that, because yes, what makes us great today will also punish us when we're at our peak and we're in our window to win. And that's the discipline you have to not go down that road. And yes, it will help us right now, but it'll tie us up so much and it'll stop us eventually from winning a championship. And we want to be in that window, not only with great players, but with some flexibility to be able to maneuver and add even better players right when it counts. So when we're in that window, we can be at the best we can possibly be.
So if you went out and you tied up a big player right now, and you're like, okay, this guy's going to help us right now, but to get him, it's a 5-year deal. Then when it's time to sign, you're trying to keep your core group of kids together, and now you don't have that money, because it's going to be hard to keep everybody.
Yeah, it's money, and it's the assets at times you have to give up to go out and get that player, to bring him in-house, can cost a lot. And now those same assets that are going to fuel you down the road in the future, you're not going to have. So you've got to explore it a lot of times. You got to be disciplined. And I think the money is the other thing. Is everybody writes nowadays is like, oh, Utah's got all this money. They're going to be spending and spending. The money, Logan Cooley, you're going to have to pay him a significant raise, and he's going to eat into that chunk of money. So you have to be not only disciplined, but you have to have proper planning to make sure that when you get down that road and those guys they want to get paid like superstars, you have that money available to them. So there's discipline and planning that goes on, and it happens every day, because every day we're on the phone chasing the next trade. What can make us great? And by doing that, you end up sometimes with the Marinos and the Oli Matas and the Sergachevs, which allow you to compete, but they don't punish you down the road when you're going to get into your window to win. One of the questions you asked was, how long does it take to a rebuild? Well, rebuild, when you come out of it, is the 5th year. We're in year 4. So when you come out of it and you're now the sights of playoffs and the expectation of playoffs comes at you is in the 5th year. And then from that 5th year, it's like, okay, you got to get in. And now you're trying to compete in the first round, the second round. You get to year 8 of it, and you're getting into your window. And that's when your guys get into their peak, and you got a chance. You don't know when it's going to happen, but somewhere between the 8th and the 12th year, which sounds crazy.
Right.
It sounds crazy, but go do the numbers.
Yeah,
Go to Colorado, go to St. Louis, go to Washington, go to all these teams that have gone through it. The Tampas of the world, and it's astronomically a long time to win, and you get a window in there. And hockey's different because you're not building one or two players; you're building an entire team that has to be good to compete.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen. That's what Florida has now.
Yeah.
I've talked about that before. A lot of times here on KSL on the zone and stuff, I talked about, man, Florida has 4 amazing lines.
Yeah.
And Florida basically plays playoff hockey from day one. I mean, they're so physical.
Everybody's in the hunt to beat them.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to justify their existence and how good they are in the NHL, so they get no easy games.
And they thought they had it all mapped out with Huberdeau, and and then all of a sudden that at that last moment, that Tkachuk trade came available, and that kind of like solidified what they were going for. Do you see something like that happening here, or is Cooley, Gunther, Keller our guy?
It's interesting that you asked that, because I think that as a team, and that's one reason you don't go down the road sometimes when you're going through the process of getting out of the rebuild, is that if you eat up every dollar that you have, then your flexibility goes, and you can't get involved. You don't know what's coming down the pipe. I remember Larry Plow, when I first joined the Blues. He was faced with a situation where he actually had to trade one of his star players, and he had 24 hours to do it. Nobody knew that was coming their way, and and that ended up fueling Edmonton all the way to the finals when they played Carolina. But there's deals out there that you can't forecast that are coming your way, and for us, we want to be flexible on that. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding of the flexibility we need to be involved in those deals, because there's something coming our way that we can't see that's going to make us great.
But if you're already at the cap, you can't get it.
If you spend all your money, yes. Yeah. It's like your wife with a budget. You know what I mean?
My wife does remind me of our budget all the time.
That's you.
It's interesting to talk about it that way, because that's the thing that everybody's talking about online right now. Is you're right. You've seen it. They're saying, hey, we know Ryan Smith will open the wallet. We know the shackles are off. You can go get whatever you want. But you're like, no, I'm counting every bean, and I'm saving it. And you've done such a great job at drafting. Yeah. Nobody can argue that. Yeah. Like, seeing these kids now.
Our ownership is committed to doing whatever it takes to win a championship. And when we went to go down that road of acquiring Sergachev, there wasn't a hesitation. It was like, boom, let's get it done. Like, boom. And that's not the hesitation. The hesitation is the proper planning. The planning it takes to do that, and allowing us the flexibility that when a deal does come our way, we have the ability to jump in it. And if you eat up all your money that quick, and you're so interested in today when you don't have a chance to win a championship today because your young guys aren't at their window to win, you're throwing away a lot of your assets and a lot of your money, which will pretty much take away your flexibility to bring somebody in that might add some greatness to your team, and it might be the final piece you need to win a championship.
Yeah. It gets me excited even just thinking about it.
You don't want to go to the 7th game and lose. No. You don't want to do that.
But we've seen these teams like Florida that almost needed that kick in the teeth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like you need to go deep in the playoffs, and you need to lose to be solid for the next couple of years.
Well, there's pain that's coming our way that we can't see, and you need that pain. That's going to leave some scar tissue on your superstars, and your superstars will respond. And that's, the Edmonton Oilers, when Gretzky played, they lost 4 straight to the Islanders. Tampa did the same thing. Us with the Blues, we lost to, L.A., left a scar. They went on to win a championship. Chicago a couple times beat us. And those were hard lessons to learn, and we had to build a different team to go through those guys and that made us better, and that gave us some scar tissue that when we had an opportunity to win, we did. So everybody has their form of pain that they go through. It's not pretty. Fans aren't happy.
Yeah.
Coaches aren't happy. Players aren't happy. Management's not happy, and ownership's not happy. But you have to go through a little bit of pain to get that scar tissue to be strong enough to win at the end.
That's the part. And I have started writing that. I've been talking about it for a long time, but I've been writing this article about the price of fandom, and there's your your actual cost of buying season tickets and going in.
Yeah.
And you're watching what the Jazz are doing right now, and
Yeah.
I don't watch very many Jazz games, but I work in a building where they talk about the Jazz nonstop, right?
Yeah.
And I know that it's tough to drop 30, 40 grand on season tickets for good season tickets,
Yeah.
and then just go watch your team lose every night.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's now you're paying your dues too as a fan. You're going to be there.
Yeah, and
Like the Kansas City Chiefs fans.
Yeah,
They're bad for 100 years.
Yeah, and that's a part of the process. I think, we went through with the Blues of 50-some years, and that was also our fuel, I think, in the hockey ops. Like, let's be the first, hockey ops group with the Blues to win a championship. That kind of fueled us. We can do it. That does go on, and your fan base is obviously they get a little bit of scar tissue from it too, but in a good way. I think it's hard to win a championship. Listen, there's 31 other clubs that are pushing the pace like we are. There's one championship. There's one winner at the end of the year. So, and that's the great thing about the NHL. And you got to build the best team you possibly can, and with superstars on it, and everything's got to be clicking, and you got to stay injury free.
Yeah.
You need a lot of things to go right, and
That's a lot to balance.
It does, but when you do, it's a special thing.
Yeah, man, I've seen it. I was lucky enough to be around it when the Kings won.
Yeah.
And watching what they went through, which was kind of different.
Yeah.
You talked about having to pay a superstar.
Yeah.
And next year we saw that the salary cap's going to go up a little bit. Almost the whole superstar's salary's worth.
Yeah.
How many superstars do you think each team can have? And what do you typically like? Is $8 million the superstar rate right now?
It's interesting you say that, because we have debates a lot of times about, okay, well, if you give the superstar all the money, is there anything left over for anybody else? And if you have two superstars that make all the money, can you put a team that's competitive enough behind them to allow you to win? And it's an interesting question, is because I always look at the salary cap very simple for fans that are interested in hockey. It's basically a pizza.
Oh.
And if you give 8 slices to one guy and 6 to, there's not much left over for everybody else. You got to share the pizza, and your players at some point have to get into a thought process of, hey, listen, if we want to win, we're going to have to share the pizza. So nobody's been really able to do it so far with just 2 guys. Edmonton's come pretty close of Game 7, but. We'll see. I like the theory of trying to build an entire team and spreading it out a little bit. I think it's important that you have it spread out. I think it forms a better team, and you get a better chance to win, because if a superstar get injured on your team, you're kind of done to some degree. And I think this helps you be a more resilient organization by spreading it out. And I think with what our group has done so far with drafting talent, I think we do have a good talent base coming into this organization, and it's deep because the amount of draft picks we've had.
Yeah, it's so exciting to look at the talent coming up, and Utah fans are very familiar with Iginla, and they think they are. They think they understand what's going on. Well, before I get onto that, I want one more thing about the salary cap.
Yeah,
is that if you say to a guy, we'll say it's Keller, and you go to Keller, you're like, hey, we see Shesterkin's gone out, he's demanded $10 million.
Yeah,
and you're our guy, you're our captain.
Yeah,
but if we give you $10 million, it's going to be a little less. You're going to have a less support team around you.
Yeah.
But if you're, and I hate to use this term because it sounds like bad management, but if you're a team player. Like if you believe in the system and you're like, hey, if you take less, we can spread it out more, and they do that. We've seen it, right? With Taves and Kane, there was some give and take there.
Yeah.
And if they do it, is there more of a teamwork? Like, does that help the locker room? Does the locker room feel like this guy's committed to us and not just to him?
There's a lot of different pressures coming at players around that theory that you talked about with the NHL. PA's done a great job, obviously, protecting the player and getting the salaries to grow. So they face that. They've got competitive agents that want deals that show that they're the best agent in the business. Right. So it's a little bit more complicated than just the respect of your teammates by taking less. So they're faced with it. I think that you have a better chance to get that accomplished as an organization Number one, when you have an unbelievable owner, you have a great place to play like Utah, and you have a winning franchise that has a chance to win a championship. I think you see that a little bit in Vegas and on how they seem to be able to bring people in and out of their organization. And I think that's because they do have a great ownership. They do have great fan base, and they do have a winning culture that's won a championship there before. So I think you can, I would say word scooted a little bit, but there are certain elements, but you got to remember the players do face different pressures. That's hard for them too. So I think when they're close to winning a championship, you get a better chance.
Okay. Is it truly about, like, I guess that really is the agents. We've watched TV shows about agents and how they get the best deal for their players, but I'm a guy that believes that sometimes that best deal, if you win a Stanley Cup this year and you're making $6 million and you don't even end up back on that same team, but you had that resume builder season and walk away with a cup, you get paid on the back end, right? Like,
yeah, I think there's ways of selling it for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's different points of players' careers where there might be a player that's at the end of his career and he's like, listen, the only thing I got enough money. I got enough money to get by. I want a chance to win a championship, and I can see my role here with this organization. I'll take that contract. So I think there's different points of a player's career where they might say no and they might say yes to it. But you got a better chance when you're a championship organization, and we got to get to that point.
Kind of that Raymond Bourque moment where he's like, look, all I want is a cup. Like, I'll go where the cup's going to go. Yeah, amazing. Do you have a couple minutes to talk about some prospects?
I do. Let's do it.
So let's talk about, and maybe you can educate me and in the same time educate our audience on what happens when you draft a kid like Iginla.
Yeah.
And then we signed him.
Yep.
So everybody assumed, we drafted him and we signed him.
Yeah.
Which means what in reality?
It means you've retained the player's rights. The player likes that because they get a little money in their pocket. They get some money to go back and play junior hockey, but also they get a signing bonus. So that enables them to, go out, buy a car, start to plan out their, where they're going to live in the summer, their training. They almost become pros at that time if they do it properly when they get the money. I do have a small, type dad moment with them where, I'm like,
don't spend it all in one place.
Well, I basically say, listen, you're a role model for the next guy coming. Be extremely smart with your money. That's important to us. A guy that ran an NFL team one time told me, he says, dumb breeds dumb. And he pointed to, a Lamborghini. He said, I had one in my parking lot and now I got 8. So,
okay.
So I always remember that teaching lesson that I learned that day. And I always try to, talk to our players about making smart decisions, obviously. And that, so at the end of the day, it's up to them, and they're role models for the next guy coming. And invest your money in yourself wisely, and that's important. So, but I think also with the kids that are coming, we talked about again, we'd signed them. It went back to junior. NHL players take longer. You see the NFL, you see the NBA. They come in right away, and usually they have impact. Our players are 18 years old when we draft them. Most times they don't come in and have impact right away. Sometimes it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 years to get them into the NHL, and then there's a growth pattern where they're barely hanging on in the NHL and they're up and down in the minors. So it's really kind of a 5-year process, to be honest, to get them right where they can play and be an everyday player. Now sometimes it goes quicker. You have the Bedards and the McDavids, and sometimes you draft guys like the Gunthers. And when people look at Gunther, he played early in the NHL, but you have to remember something. He played in a different team when the team wasn't very good and the team was going through the rebuild, and he had a chance to grow in that role every day. Well, now our team is not like that. We're expected to win when we go on that ice, and there's not as much forgiveness and opportunity for the young players. They've got to really go in there and beat somebody else out for a job.
So, and that's one thing I've been saying, and I was a little bit surprised when I saw Doan get sent down.
Yep.
Not this time, but the first time I thought what he was doing was well. And then I had a off record, I think we'll call it off record conversation with Bear, and he's like, nah, he's getting the opportunities, but he didn't have the confidence to finish the opportunities. And then I talked to Doan, and he's like, I'm creating opportunities. And I'm like, okay, I see the growth plan. Now I can kind of figure out what's going on here. So for a player like that, this is exactly what's expected. And with Lamoureux, this is exactly what's expected.
Yeah, it's the norm in the business. Kids, players, agents don't necessarily like the American League.
Right.
They're not great fans of it. But what's interesting about it is the two things. Number one, usually a player will come back to you and they'll say, "Hey, listen, you know what? I needed that. Like that, I needed to go down there and play. That's helped my game grow," because they get in all different situations. They're leaders at young ages down there. Sometimes they're the best player on that team, and that team revolves around them, growing and making plays, and they're difference makers every night. I think the other thing about that is that it leaves a scar on them.
Okay, we're back to the scar tissue.
There's a huge scar in a good way that's left in the American League. It's a different league. There are longer runways. There are a lot of buses. There's crappy food. There's bad rinks at times. There's travel that's tough. There's sometimes practice. You got to travel an hour in your car to practice and drive an hour back, and you got to unpack your bag when you get in at 2:00 in the morning. And it's just the American League is a great place, but it's not like the NHL.
So you go down, you get good competition, but you're also realizing,
and it's on. I mean, it's big, it's fast, it's hard. It's kind of fuzzy to them because there's players coming at them everywhere with maximum amount of, they want to make it, right? They're hungry. So it's a hard league. And it leaves a scar on the player where in the back of their mind, they're like, I think they want to keep their standard high as an NHL player because they don't ever want to go back there. And that's a good thing. And I think that when you raise your players, when you raise your kids right in your house, you see goodness happen. And when you raise your players the right way, going through the American League, great things happen.
It's funny because when I was with the Idaho Steelheads, I was actually on the roster. And then I get waived and picked up by the Anchorage Aces. Right?
Yeah.
So in the East Coast League, we had one guy that played in the NHL.
Yeah.
And after practices, every once in a while, the guys would be like, "Tell us stories about the NHL again." And he'd be like, "First off, there were bagels everywhere. We could have free bagels." And just talking about the difference in the leagues and how nice it was to be up there. And he's like, "I never had to pack my own bag."
And it changes you. I always laugh. There's a good story. We had a kid. He was from way up in Flin Flon, and he was the most humble human being I've ever met in my life, and tough as nails. And he was he got almost called up by accident to the NHL. But when he got there, he spent a good month in there, and he came back down, and he had these fancy suits, and he had change. He wanted nothing to do with the American League, and I thought that league changes everybody, but in a good way. It's a good way. There's, and I think when those players, get back, they learn, hey, there's one league to play in, and that's the NHL, and they're gonna do everything they can to stay there. So the American League it's a great development hockey league. They do a great job down there. It's a hard league to play in. Some of my other speeches to the kids, I'm like, this is the way you struggle in the American League. I said, you go down and think you're the best player and try and do too much. And sure enough, after 2 weeks of getting your butt whooped, you're going to realize you're not, and you're going to lose your confidence. And then it's a battle to get it back. And the next thing you know, you'll be in the third line sitting out games in the stands, and you'll be wondering why. I said, the league is good. It is flat out good down there. It is a hard, hard league. And you better show up with your maximum amount of effort tuned in, because if you're not, you're going to go in a spiral, and you'll never catch up to the end of the year.
So that's something you've seen happen time and time again. You're talking about you send a first-round draft pick down to the A, and you see him go from line 1 to line 3.
It's because they think in their mind that, okay, I'm going to go down and dominate, and it's just too hard of a league to dominate. And you got to go down there and understand how good it is.
Because the whole league is built of guys in that same category.
Everybody's will cut off their arm to get into the NHL, and they're coming at you. And they're big, it's fast, it's moving, and there's less structure. It's a harder league to play in at times for players. You almost got to, provide more effort because of the structure. It's all over the place, and they're coming.
Wow. That's amazing. So now we've got guys that are down there. They're developing. Even when you see them struggle, that's that scar tissue you want them to go through.
Yeah, it is. You know, they never take for granted for playing in the National Hockey League. They always remember, hey, listen, I want to be in the National Hockey League. It's like your professionalism, your dedication. Like I always tell people about the NHL, the young players, it's the hardest thing you will ever do in your life is to play in the National Hockey League, and you got to be all in every day. You know, as I say, my saying is, rent. Success in the NHL is rented. Rent's due every day.
Oh man!
And whether you're a GM, you're a coach, or you're a trainer, or you're a player, you got to pay the rent.
That's one of those things. It's a saying that goes. That's right along the same lines of what we talk about in the fire department. It's the same thing the Navy SEALs talk about. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. You have to do it again today. And that kind of reminds me of the same thing is like we put guys in recruit camp. The Army puts guys in boot camp. The Navy SEALs do their thing, and it breaks you down as a person.
Yep.
It takes your confidence. And it builds you up as a team.
Yep.
So that you come in and say, I can do all these things. I found out I'm stronger than I thought I was.
Yeah.
But I also realize that I need everybody.
Yeah.
And I need to be good to them so that they're good to me.
And the American League is somewhat of that. It's a teacher.
Okay.
It's a teacher for sure. If you can make it out.
So when you sign these guys, when you sign your draft picks, we had kids that you signed.
Yeah.
Can you sign NCAA guys and give them money?
They can't go back to college. So, in junior, we can sign a player and they can go back to junior and play there. But you can't go into the NCAA if you're under pro contract.
Okay.
So it doesn't work that. It's a different scenario for guys that we've drafted that have gone on to college.
So when you draft an NCAA guy, when does that clock start ticking as far as does he have to sign within 3 years? Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, there's some sneaky agents that are trying to graduate guys early, so it's on a 3-year window. But it's basically you have a short period of time with those guys, depending on how long they play in the USHL. And most times if guys play out their 4 years, they can become free agents. Most don't. Most kids are pretty loyal and excited to play for the franchise that drafted them.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've definitely seen. It's so rare that when it's not that way that it makes the news and people talk about that player for a long time. Happened last year with the Ducks. Was it?
There's always one every year that happens, but when you draft a kid, if you do the process right and you bring him in and he's out of your development camp every year and your development coaches are spending time with him every game and, helping him get bigger, stronger, faster and investing all our resources into making him an NHL player. It's very rare that it's kind of like your first love. You remember your first love for life. And that's when an NHL team extends that and drafts the player and shows the confidence that they have that they want to draft this player, and then they invest all the time and energy in it. Usually it doesn't happen. Most times if it does, it's driven by the agent.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Most hockey players I've known have been pretty down-to-earth people.
Yep.
So what should the fan base expect with Tidge next? When do we see?
Well, Tidge is going through his rehab here. He's getting back on the ice.
Surgery, right?
Yeah, so he's coming back, and he should be. You'll see him around. I don't think in development camp he'll be ready, but when we go to rookie camp next year, it'll be the start for him, and he'll have to go and play. He missed a lot of hockey this year, so we'll see how he does in rookie camp, and we'll go from there. You never want to shut down somebody's dreams. Say, you're not going to play in the National Hockey League next year. You're going to go back to junior. We never do that. We always have that optimistic look at the player and say, let's give him a chance to compete for a job. Let's see where he goes from there.
And that's true from every player that comes in, free agent.
Yep.
Last pick.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see what you can do. It's one of those things where as a GM you don't want to crush anybody's dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also if you find the diamond in the rough, it just makes you look like a better GM, right?
Sometimes it does.
When we're talking about the minor leagues, I've always wanted to ask you, and I think I even asked for permission to ask this question one time.
All right.
And if you don't want to talk about it, you just tell me, that's fine. But the phone call from Jordan Binnington.
Yeah, it was a text.
That was a text.
It was a text. We drafted Jordan. He had a special, place in my heart because he was from Richmond Hill. And that's my hometown. So there wasn't a lot of players coming out of Richmond Hill. So I always remember that about him. and Benny had done pretty good with our organization, but at the time we had made some trades and we had some, like Ville Husso was coming into the organization and Jake Allen was going up, and we had made some trades for some other goaltenders, and Bennington had kind of got pushed around. He'd kind of got loaned out to Providence and that, but he had really good numbers. And I can remember I was somewhere and a scout from another team came up to me and goes, "Wow, boy, you guys are right on track with Benny. Like, he looks good, you know." And I kind of like, I hadn't seen him play as much because I was still on the amateur side. I'd seen him play a couple times that year. And then out of the blue, like he texted me, and we weren't really, that close and, like texting all the time or whatever, but it was just, hey, you asked me a question one time. So when do you think I'm ready? I'm ready right now. And then I just text him back. One of my favorite quotes is, "Hard to beat a man that never gives up." And I text that back to him. And so, like, I don't know, I want to say like 10 minutes later, like, it was quick. The phone rang, and it was like Doug Armstrong, and he said, "Oh, we're going to call Benny up."
Wow. Did he get the same text? Or
No, it was totally
just
different. It was two different things. So it was kind of a weird.
Oh, that's so much different than I thought the story was.
Yeah, I know. And so, soon enough, he did get his chance in the National Hockey League. Yeah.
And wins a cup.
And he went on to win a cup. And it's funny.
Was he in the East Coast League, or was he?
He was in the East Coast League, American League. We loaned him back out, then back into our American League team in San Antonio. But the interesting part of all that was, you don't teach a baby shark how to bite. And when Benny was coming up, he played 2 games for us that were outstanding. One was a February game in Kitchener. He had 45 saves. And the next one was he went to the Memorial Cup, and for people, that's the Canadian Championship. And he played a game in there where he was elite, and he made some huge saves, like right at key times of the game. And that was a clincher for us, watching him in those moments. And I'm like, that guy knows how to win. Like, he just the way he plays, and it's unusual to see a draft-eligible goaltender play in the Canadian Championship. It's usually the 19 and 20-year-old playing in net. It's very rarely the draft eligible guy. And that was kind of odd. So we went to the draft, list, and we said, hey, if we get him right here, it'd be a good pick. And so when we got him, we drafted him. He went through the process with us. And when he played in the 7th game against Boston, there was a play where the player comes across the front of the net and he reaches like he's going to wrap it around him, and Benny just extends the pad and makes the save. And for me, that was a game-changing thing because Boston was coming on, and if they score there, they're closing the gap. The fans go crazy, and they might just win that game because of the momentum they've got. But that save he made, I've seen him do it under pressure before, and I'm a big believer in, like I said, you don't teach a baby shark how to bite. They know how to bite when they're young, and he knew that was in him the whole time. It's like he can make key saves in big moments of the game.
Is there a place on your scouting form for something like that? You're like, okay, technically he's good. You got Corey Schwab, and I don't know who else your goalie guys are, but you're out watching goalies, because I've scouted goalies before. I used to help, with Des Moines. I was trying to get them goalies back in the USHL days. And so I would go out and scout goalies, and I would look for form, system, and making sure they understood their position. Yeah. But I always looked for that guy that maybe he didn't play the right form. Yeah. Or whatever form, but he had that killer instinct.
Yeah, I mean, in goaltenders, you got to see. There's moments of the season they're hard to see because they don't play a lot. The draft eligible guys, most times, are on the bench that year, so you get a very small window to see their greatness.
I thought about that, yeah.
And so they've got to have certain structure, certain size, certain push in the legs, and for me, they have to have the ability to make that second save too. But there's key things at key times of the game. The big moments where they've got to make saves, because you see a lot of times goaltenders, they miss that moment, the goal goes in, but yet they make huge saves when the game's out of reach. Then that doesn't help you win. Nope. You've got to. It's the pressure. Up a goal, down a goal, making that save in that window, that can be a true turning point for a team.
I was instructed. JP Parisi was coaching in the USHL, and I was going to all these AAA tournaments looking for other goalies. And I'm like, I keep hearing about these goalies that are on these bad teams, but they're making 50, 60 saves. Yeah. And he's like, don't go scout them. I want guys that are in 0-0, 1-1 games. I want to see how they do. See how they do. Yeah. But these guys that are in 50, they know they're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it's hard. We once drafted a goaltender out of practice. So his name was Joe Hoffer. He made the
Oh, no
NHL
way.
for St. Louis. He's a heck of a goaltender. That was a hard one. But we got to the point in the list where we didn't like anybody, and so he was still available, and we loved him. We just weren't sure if he could stop the puck in the game. We knew he could do it in practice,
Good practice
and he
goal.
played on one of the worst teams in junior history. So it was hard to see him play because he was getting shelled 8-1. You know, it's just. But we drafted him, and he's been a heck of a player for the Blues. Yeah,
Yeah, he's been amazing. All right, man, there's so much I wanted to talk about, and I hope even just talking that much about juniors and that kind of fills in some gaps for people that don't really understand what's going on with Iginla. He's not a bust. Doan's not a bust because we keep sending him back. Lamoureux's not a bust because we keep sending him back.
Yeah.
One thing that surprised me this year, I know, am I keeping you way too long?
No, you're good.
One thing that really surprised me this year is when Ingy went down, you pulled up Stauber.
Yep.
And Stauber wasn't in the organization before.
Right.
Kind of thought maybe we'd see one of the other guys that we'd seen
Yep.
that you'd watch grow. And Stauber comes in as phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that kid's it seems like he's got a lot of growth potential.
Yeah.
Was that why you guys brought him in? Like, I guess I don't know what my question.
Well, we signed him in
Just
the
surprised.
we signed him in the summer because he didn't play in the NHL the year before, but the previous year he had really good numbers, crazy good numbers. So we were like, listen, at worst he's played NHL games. We know that he can play NHL games, and so that's kind of the reason we signed him, is because he had a pedigree of winning NHL games. When he'd been called up, we're like, okay, we'll roll the dice here, and he came in, he played really, really well in training camp. He left a really good impression on us. And then, he was really good in Tucson there. So we rolled the dice and brought him up, and he stole us a few games. And then Ingy got back going. So it's been, you never know with goaltenders, right? They're
a different breed.
They're a different breed, but they, he was really good, and he's still good in the American League. And, those guys never know when their chance will come. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. It was really fun to watch World Juniors and watch Robble.
Yeah.
Like that kid is that because you typically see a 6'4", was 6'6", 6'4"?
I think he's 6'6", yeah.
So typically you see a 6'6" goaltender, and they're drafted because they're 6'6", and the hope is we're gonna make him better.
Yeah,
that kid's good.
He is good, and I think the two things I really like about Michael is that he works at his game. He works hard at getting better, and when you're that big, he reminds me of Ben Bishop. We drafted Ben Bishop back in the day in St. Louis, and it took him a while as a big guy, as he moves, to kind of close up his holes and be more consistent about his movements as a big guy. I think it's tougher. And one thing I love about Michael is that he improves. Like he gets better all the time. You go back and watch him, and he's cleaned up this. And every time I watch him, he gets a little bit better. So he's not perfect. He's still going to have some struggles, but I like his game. And he plays at UMass. He's got to be the man there every night. They've got a decent team, but for them, they play in Hockey East, and it's hard for them to play. He's got to be at his best to get the win every night. So I like that.
I'm trying to remember, it was pretty awesome. I got to e-bug with the Utah Grizzlies the other day against Allen.
Yeah.
So I got to see Thelene. No, who's the goalie? I can't remember.
Thornton.
Is it Thornton? Okay,
Yeah.
Probably Thornton. Anyway, it was a Utah Hockey Club goalie. I'd seen him, and then I got to be on the ice during warm-ups anyway with him, and that was kind of fun. And it's just fun to start seeing guys and be like, "That's a Utah Hockey Club guy. That's a Utah Hockey Club guy."
Yeah.
So it's fun, and that's just another part of it is for people to know that, man, you've got prospects everywhere, not just in Tucson.
Yeah,
you got guys playing over
in
Europe.
It's a big operation for us because we have more draft picks than any other team in the National Hockey League. So we have to go out there and be extremely aggressive on seeing them. And we have a bigger staff than most teams. And it's all about growing and developing your prospects. And it's its own department. It's its own animal. We're different than any other team because of the amount of picks that we've had. So we're constantly trying to develop them, get them better, get them to a point where we have to make a decision whether we sign them or not. But I know the future's bright. I get to watch them and watch them on video and see the reports. And there's a lot of good talent out there that's going to help fuel this club. over the next year, few years to help us not only become a good NHL, but a great NHL team, a team that has a chance to win a championship down the road.
Is there a name you want to drop for us right now? That's somebody that's going to blow us away, maybe makes the roster next year that Utah didn't get to see this year?
Well, I think that, you're going to have Boot and Simashev and Harabel and Baudouin and, Tej coming through the door. You're going to have some big boys that can play, and they'll make their own bed, see what they can do. But, yeah, I'm really intrigued by, obviously Boot and Simashev being over there. Cole Baudouin's had a great year.
Baudouin looks,
yeah,
he kind of reminds me of Doan a little bit, the way they use their bodies. I could be completely off.
No, he's similar. He's a big man. He's a big, thick man, and he plays the game the right way. He plays hard. He plays the winning way.
I think he got shafted in World Juniors. I did not think that he deserved
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those ones that just happens and you move on. But he plays in Barrie. They're a competitive club trying to get a championship out of the O, and he's in the fight every night there.
Yeah, impressive. It's such a great. Another kid that I was really impressed with him. Again, I'm a goalie. I know how to watch goalies, but I also see stuff in people every once in a while that I'm like, that guy's going to be good. Is a late pick from you guys was Owen Allard. I thought that kid has a lot of upward potential too.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids. Noel Nord, same thing. Allard, Bieber, playing over in Sweden's had a heck of a year. Hradek's been another guy that played World Juniors for Czech there. He led their team in points, I believe, or tied. And there's a lot of good kids we have coming. So
did we have like 4 guys on Czech? Wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a ton on Czech, but it's really going to be interesting the next few years to watch those kids develop and see if they can take the next step to becoming good NHL players that can help drive this club. So it's that's the good thing about the fans of Utah is that they get to watch all this happen right before their eyes, and it's happening. When you go to the rink and at the NHL level and also at the American League level, and they're getting to see good players that are eventually going to make their way up.
Well, I am just ridiculously excited to be a part of it as a fan, as a longtime hockey fan, and now, like I was saying before, I'm decked out in the gear. I'm at every game. I'm so excited to watch. Like I try to watch all the Tucson games even.
Yeah.
It's just been fun to watch. I'm excited to see all the surprises you have for us as far as who gets pulled up next, and maybe later on we can get into discussing all the algorithms that go into that. But I hope this was educational for our fan base on basically what's going on with some of our prospects, how that kind of works, and also what goes on with the rebuild and why you guys aren't jumping out, making trades, bringing in all the fancy players that are out there right now that have 2 years left to play.
Well, I think
10-year contract.
I think the other thing on that last note I have to say is we did a lot of trades, in the summer. You know what I mean? And kind of took care of our own bed back then. So, it's not to say we won't make more coming up, but we were able to pull off the Marinos and the Sergachevs and
for huge, huge.
And get the Matt is done, in the fall trade, when we need a player, and now we're able to grab Nick DeSimone off waivers. That's another good one for us.
What a freaking surprise that guy!
Yeah, he's been great too. So now we're getting to the fun part where we get to our team gets snapped together, and here we go. We're chasing it.
Yeah, we are chasing it. And I brought that up with Adrian the other day. I'm like, Nick DeSimone, like off waivers and comes in and is just exactly what you needed him to be.
Yeah, he's been outstanding.
That doesn't happen very often that you get a guy like that off waivers.
No, our staff does a pretty good job though off waivers. They've been able to fetch a few that have helped us.
It was sad to see Colin.
Yeah, Colin go. Yeah,
I say it all the time. No, I can't say it.
Yeah.
Because I'm at a lot of the practices and I see him get on the ice first, and I saw he was really working to try to crack that lineup. But man, it's the
tremendous kid. Yeah, tremendous heart, tremendous character, great will to improve. It got to a point where he'd sat out a lot, and we'd added some bodies, and some bodies were on their way back, and it just, we had to try and get him down in the minors, back playing, and unfortunately wasn't able to clear waivers and ended up with Pittsburgh. So
yeah, well, good for him.
It's a good opportunity for him, and great kid.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the fans on these bases? Like, hopefully we get to do this again in a couple of weeks, where I like to explain how we build lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And you know why all the best players just aren't on one line, and
Yep.
so we'll talk about that. But anything else you want to add before?
Well, it's going to be exciting. We got 6 more games before the deadline, so it's going to be we're on it right now, and it's going to be an exciting time for the club. And we're in the pressure blender. What you want to be when you feel the pressure, you're in the right spot. So it's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Bill, thanks for your time, and thanks for everything, man. It's just been so much fun. I just love watching you be a master at your craft. I'd also like to talk about how you picked Bear as a coach, because I've been just super impressed with him. And you told me the story one time we were talking. You just kind of saw him, how he interacted with his club.
Yeah, that's a later story. We'll go through that one other day.
I know I've kept you a long time. So Utah Hockey Club, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. This is exactly what they told us. Bill, you've been 100% honest and almost a little like you're telling prophecies here, because everything you're saying is coming true. So we have no reason to doubt everything you're saying now.
Yeah, well, it's factual, that's for sure. So, hopefully we can. I've always tried to be transparent as a GM and provide a good understanding for our fans.
All right, and that is the Utah Puck Report. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Utah Puck Report. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Rate us, leave us feedback, let us know what you want us to do better. Big thanks to our sponsors, Only Crowns. Love having a dentist sponsor for the hockey podcast. Check them out at onlycrowns.com. Thanks to KSL Sports, the Utah Hockey Club, Madison Miller, and Tegan Stevens for producing. And thanks to the American Hitmen for that awesome intro song. We'll see you next week.